Today, I will be learning how to draw faces and heads from 20 video tutorials here on YouTube. What did I get myself into? I'm trying to learn how to properly draw heads and faces using the fundamentals to try and get a better understanding of how everything goes. And this way, I can finally determine my art style. There are a few videos in here by the art teacher himself, Brunet. I will also be breaking down a few videos from this artist I just discovered recently called chomang_drawing. I don't know if I said that right, but he has a lot of video tutorials as well. You should check him out. And we also have a tutorial by White Manga, Blue Biscuits, Kuzomori, Macchiato, QR Bits, David Finch, My Mangaka Life, June, Kuroshiro, who also has a lot of tutorials on their channel if you want to go check them out. And finally, we have Nero, we have Mikey Mega, and we also have a video by Didi Mark. Now let's get started with Mark Brunet's How to Draw Simple Faces. As you know, Mark Brunet is a very talented artist that teaches art here on YouTube. He has his very own school, so I had to follow some of his tutorials. He very quickly shows in this video how to simply break down the guidelines to draw faces. He also clarifies that it's more for quick sketching, but I feel like if you weren't just quick sketching, these faces could be more defined. In this video, the art teacher explains a bit more in detail on how to draw the simple faces from the last video, using more of a cylinder method. I could recall placing simple guidelines for where the facial features go. Here I tried drawing two heads using this tutorial. Now it's a good tutorial, I just feel like I need more knowledge on the fundamentals to be able to draw a head and face that I'm actually proud of. In this video, he goes more in depth on the construction and fundamentals of the face. And for me, at least, I would say I understand how to draw a head and face more with this video, and I can see a slight improvement from the last, making me a bit more proud of this doodle than the last ones that I made, but we'll see how it goes as this video progresses. Again, in this video tutorial, it was more of a recap from his last video, simplifying it more for a more stylized look overall, which is what I was looking for in the first place since I want to be dedicated to manga art. Not much to say for this one except that they explain the nose placement and show an easier way to position head angles. I would say you can use this more if you have a chibi style, but it still applies well for regular face drawings as well. They didn't really go in depth as a tutorial, and it was more really of an advice video, but they did briefly go through a small method for drawing heads, which they called the mask method. Basically imagining a mask on the head, and the strings of the mask determine the basic guidelines. Kuzumori uses the box method, grabbing the skull and breaking it down into box shapes from various angles. And I can really say about this is that I'm not a fan. I think it's quite difficult to draw with the box method, and if you don't practice it a lot, your proportions can come out looking wonky. I'm not saying it's a bad method, it requires a lot of practice and it's not really what I'm looking for, but I could definitely practice it a little more and probably get better at using the box method. So maybe that's something for the future. This way to draw faces really made me understand how to draw the face. It's like imagining a sphere with guidelines. When that sphere moves around, so does the guidelines. I think out of all the faces, this might be the best one I've drawn so far. Just like Chomang's last video, I sort of just applied what he taught last time and drew this face. Kuroshiro is like one of those god-tier Twitter artists, so I was excited to do this tutorial. They basically broke down the skull into simple shapes, but first they drew the skull. But I'm lazy, so I didn't do that, and I just imagined and copied the simplified guidelines they showed in the video. And I just followed that through the drawing and the faces using the guidelines. Blue Biscuits went into detail on the facial construction and its placement, also using the masked method mentioned earlier on this video, using more ellipses than squares. The Loomis method is drawing out a sphere and basically drawing a needle through it. This needle acts as a guideline to the angle in which you draw the head, and then breaking down the face with more guidelines. Now, this method has been around for a really long time and a lot of people use it, and I was finally happy to learn it. I did get a little bit confused on how to do it, so I think some of the faces that I drew here looked a little weird, But overall, I think this was a good way of learning how to draw faces and heads. This was just a more simple tutorial on how to draw more difficult angles, and I really enjoyed this tutorial a lot because it really showed an easier way of drawing out the heads in more of a style that I wanted. Again, more simplified guidelines for drawing faces using the 50-50 rule, well, 50-50-50 rule, sorry, which is just cutting in half this egg shape you draw to be able to determine where the facial features are located. I liked this tutorial. It was easy to follow and it was funny. I've never been happier over someone losing at League of Legends. Again, drawing a ball shape and determining where the guideline goes, this ball acts as a reference for the angles. If the ball moves around, so does the guidelines. I do think I might have to make the eyes smaller when I draw my manga faces so they don't look too weird. I am trying to make my style look like a mix of Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man. So if you guys have any advice for doing that, please let me know. It's a useful guide, but don't make it a cage. This is what Mikey Mega said, and I really felt this quote in my core because I do see myself using the guideline to the T instead of just drawing, because the guideline is not, it's just a guideline. It's not supposed to be something you follow step by step. It's just there to help you, and you can edit the facial features as you please to make it look better, because sometimes your guidelines are going to be a little wonky. So I really enjoyed this tutorial because of that quote. DD Mark. I love DD Mark. His channel is so much fun. His tutorials are so much fun. I watched a lot of how to draw in this certain style for the manga. This channel inspired me so much to start my own manga. So I was really happy when I saw this tutorial. And for this tutorial, it's quite different. He does a very combined method of a lot of other methods that we saw today, like the mask method with the box method and with the sphere method, which I think all of them together works pretty well. I just need to practice it a little more if I'm going to start using this method for drawing, and that way I can make better facial features. This tutorial was like the Loomis method, but just simplified, which really did help, and I really liked the faces, or the face that I drew when I did this tutorial. I feel like I did a pretty good job. He does say that the ratios of the face really depend on the gender or the age, and I think that's really important to note because the ratios are like the 50-50-50 rule, and that's going back to a different video tutorial that we saw in this video, because it really depends on where you split the head to be able to make different facial features or different head shapes. And I thought that was really important to know in this video as well. I feel like I've learned a lot from making this video. One of the things that the artist said, which was White Manga, he said, don't be afraid to fail and correct yourself as you go along. It stuck to me because I definitely rush myself into perfecting the details, and I get frustrated when the face didn't look good, although I followed the guidelines. And then that just comes back around to what Mikey Mega said, which was, it's a useful guideline, but don't make it a cage, because sometimes you got to take a step back and correct the drawing as you go along. If you want to see all the studies I made in this video, they will be posted on my Threads account. Also, this video took so long, which was why I didn't post anything in February. I've been working on this video since December of last year. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.